Good morning, everyone. Well, it might be afternoon or evening when you're listening to this. My name is Anne-Marie Beggs. I am a Davis facilitator based in Dublin, in Ireland. And today I have with me Una Buckley from Blossom for Life. Good morning, Una. How are you?
Morning, great. Hi, lovely to chat to you all.
Myself and Una decided to do this podcast because it's Dyslexia Awareness Month. And so during the whole month, I'm trying to share content that's beneficial for the dyslexic and the neurodiverse community in general. And I know I've seen Una is doing the very same thing. To start off, Una, do you want to say a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so thank you all for tuning in. So I'm Una Buckley, the founder of Blossom for Life. I'm also neurodivergent, so I have dyslexia, dysgraphia. I always mix them up.
A lot
And
of different.
and ADHD. So I had my own struggles throughout my own educational path, both in school systems and in universities. And then I realized, okay, hopefully I can come up with new strategies and mechanisms that will help students not only move through the education system, but also organization or time management or, all the kind of day-to-day difficulties that may be
Yeah.
propping up for people
I
with
mean,
neuro.
you're right. It's not just about, I think sometimes when people think about dyslexia, they kind of associate it more with children. And obviously, children grow up to be teenagers, adults, go into the workplace. And sometimes they have supports in college and then they go to the workplace. And like you said, if they don't have good skills like time management and, personal skills, then that's where some people then kind of like fall off a cliff. So, tell us a little bit about your schooling, Una. What was that like?
Yeah, so my educational path was again a bit of a challenge as I was mentioning. So I suppose
Yeah.
thankfully kind of developed then those mechanisms that I would now work in my organization for the day-to-day difficulties. For my schooling experience, there was an awful lot obviously of tests and projects and
Yeah.
weekly metrics and spelling tests and Irish tests and grammar and all things that actually took an awful lot of pressure and took an awful lot of time. I would have probably spent a huge amount of time at a very young age on doing, weekly homework and studying and looking over things. So I came from a very educational orientated background. So an awful lot of my growing up years really was on around schooling and learning
Yeah.
and education for
And
me.
I don't think a lot hasn't changed really in that area. I mean, because I'm in a lot of I see in a lot of parent support groups for dyslexia and neurodivergency in general on social media, and parents are still, my child is spending 2 hours on homework, and like I'm saying, well, there's actually government guidelines in place that say your 7 and 8-year-old should not be doing 2 hours of homework. And you just have to go in and say to the teacher, well, no, we're not doing that because one, they're not learning and it just creates, doesn't it, a whole stressful environment for the whole family, not just the child. It becomes, I mean, it's most like a battleground. I mean, even though I've been doing this work for 20 years, I still used to often do my son's homework because I go, what difference does it make? He's just tearing his hair out. And so, now I just say to parents, if they can't do it, you're better off like going, okay, so the maximum I'm going to spend is 30 minutes. So I'm going to do 10 minutes of English, 10 minutes of maths and whatever. And I said, and then you just write beside it, this is what my child could do in that space of time. Because there's really nothing to be gained for like your experience sitting there for hours and hours and stress and homework and then missing out on all the fun stuff. Because kids need
Yeah,
to be out in the air.
totally depends, I suppose, really on the environment at home and the
No, it does,
perspective.
because I mean, I come from a similar background where like it was very academic as well, and expectations are very high. I know people now are a lot more chilled out with their kids, but there is still a lot of moms online who are still spending a lot of time, sitting down doing homework. Um, so you weren't diagnosed as dyslexic till you were 17, isn't that right, Una?
Yes, I had a really late diagnosis, so I'd have moved through an awful lot of years of
So you
hard.
must have worked very hard in the years prior to that for them to not notice.
Yeah, I think the classic, neurodivergent trait of masking and covering things up is a big one for me, and for lots of people that we would see now.
I think that is much more common in girls as well, because I have like a mixed bag of students, but the girls seem to always come later. So they manage to get through primary school and they just keep working hard. And I've heard the board are like, no, can't do it. That's it. I'm not doing, I'm not putting myself under the same amount of pressure. So I have noticed in the last year, 90% of the kids who come to me are all boys. And there isn't more boys who are dyslexic. People used to think this. There isn't really. It's just that the girls just seem to, like you said, they mask it. They find strategies around it. And probably some of the strategies that you developed yourself, Una, and that you use in your business. And how was college? Was it
Yeah,
better?
university was definitely still a challenge for
Yeah,
me, moving through obviously a secondary school system, leaving cert, and the pressure of that exam environment was really quite a lot. And
yeah,
then moving into kind of a formal education structure, of which I still am heavily involved in. So it's I suppose it still is a learning curve, and
yeah,
but thankfully there's definitely ways of moving through a system with a lot more ease and I suppose structure. And I suppose that's really individual. So it's really
yeah.
about the person themselves, if they're tuning in or a family member is tuning in on their behalf. It's about really finding out where the aspects of difficulties are and what are the most suitable, mechanisms that can be put in place. And then if things aren't really working, it's about then revisiting and re-looking at, okay, well, we've trying this software, we're trying this way of learning, that's not really sticking in their short or their long-term memory. So what else new can be implemented, and how we can kind of change from a way of doing things into then something different that may be an awful lot more productive and may suit their style of learning and retention an awful lot easier.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, you're right. People sometimes, I had a client, she lives on the Isle of Man actually, and I started working with her about a year and a half ago. And when I went, the mom rang me actually, and the mom is a psychologist, and she said to me, "Oh, she's been working with this lady for, I think, 4 or 5 years." She said in the beginning the child improved, but she just kept sticking with her even though it created an awful lot of friction in the family because they were all afraid of this particular lady. When she'd come to the house, there couldn't be any noise. And they used to work in the kitchen. Nobody could go make, I'm much more relaxed at work like that. And I said, but why did you keep doing it if it wasn't making a difference? And it was just creating more stress. And she said, well, I felt I had to be doing something. And so I think doing something just for the sake of doing something is a complete waste of time, especially like you said, if it's creating more anxiety. And so if it doesn't work, like try something else. Because when I organized the conference in Malahide 2 years ago, that's the thing I was trying to highlight to parents. There actually is quite a lot of support in Ireland, but you have to go and find the people. They're all like you and me, small little businesses that are kind of unknown a lot of the time. Like the doctors don't know us probably. So it depends on who you go to for the advice and for the help. But like with a little bit of research, there is help out there. You just have to find the right one because you're right, each child's different, each teenager, each adult, they all like a different approach. So some people might, and I think a lot of it has to do with the personality of the person you're working with too. I was interviewing Mark Stoddart yesterday, and he's a famous, well-known sculptor and philanthropist. And he said the most important thing to be is kind. So he said, if you do nothing else when you're working with a child, just be kind, because kindness has the biggest effect on their emotions. So I know you do a lot of work, Una, with secondary schools and colleges. So what type of do you go in and do workshops? Do you do one-to-ones? What type of What type of work are you doing in the schools and in the colleges?
Again, it really, I suppose, depends on where the needs are at. So we
Sure,
do
yeah.
a lot of teacher and lecturer training programs. So for primary and secondary school teachers, upskilling as part of their Crow Park hours, either in person or online. We've done a range of schools over the last number of weeks, over a series of, assistive technology or writing or spelling or just classroom and UDL approaches to learning. And then from a university base, from a disability support staff, but also then from a lecture, correcting exams and the logistics around liaising
Sure.
with the student.
So you do a tailor-made approach. Is that
Exactly.
very
Yes.
good? That's exactly what I do too. But and that's the best approach, isn't it? You talk to the clients, see what they need. Because sometimes people come to me and they say, "Oh, my child's really bad at maths, blah blah blah," and then I'll talk to the child, and then I'll say, "Well, your child's actually dyslexic, and so there's no point in me hopping straight to maths if we haven't like resolved their issues around reading it, because it's kind of a backwards approach, if you know what I mean. So it's okay, the maths might improve, but it won't continue to improve because, the older they get, the more complicated the words are in the maths. And so I said, I'll be doing a disservice. You can take people's money, but you have to make sure that what you're giving them is what they actually need. And I think that's the only way you know that is when you have, like you said, like a one-to-one conversation and then tailor make what it is that, like, to me, if I'm working with a child, it's what the child thinks they need. Because very often kids they're good at hiding stuff, like you said, or masking. But then when you have a chat with them, like I do in initial consultation, and like the parents are like sometimes surprised at the questions and they go, why are you asking them that? Because you're trying to get a complete picture of, it's not really just about can they read this and do the comprehension. It's like how do they feel about sitting in a classroom? And do you think that since you have left college that the support systems have improved in college?
It's a very good question. So I'm still heavily involved in university system.
Yeah,
So I still am very much ingrained in academic policies and academic intervention. So in my personal opinion, and having been experienced in different universities in Ireland and abroad, lots of similar structures really do take place from when I, let's say, did my first undergrad. The onus and the responsibility still obviously is on the learner to still
sure.
produce the same amount of information, still learn it in the same format, and still be in, a classroom and a lecture environment that is often really, really challenging. For my own studies, there's an involvement on, not only kind of this concept with attendance, but also this kind of, blended aspect, and that kind of pre baby COVID in a way wasn't as rigid as I feel it is now. Yes, it's obviously very important that people attend and observe and interact with information. However, there's an awful lot of emphasis that needs to be put more on a learning environment that is suitable not only for students in a classroom, but in a university context of large lecture halls and, all crammed in and no windows, and all those environments can really impact
Yeah.
from a neurodiversity sensory stance. They may need to sit in a particular space, they may need to have different sports around them, they may even just need a wider desk. So I'm often kind of
The
crammed in.
desks are very small sometimes, aren't they? I went
Yeah.
to college in Maynooth and I studied science. And I remember like the lectures in physics and chemistry and biology are fine. But the maths lecture, because there was people from other courses also doing maths, there was between about thousands. And the desks were like smaller than this laptop and you to get in. And I remember if you came late to the other lectures, the lecturer would notice, but there was just so many people in this lecture. And I remember arriving late one day and I went in and I was going, because I do not like rooms with no windows that really just don't work very well for me. And so I go in and I'm sitting near the back and just the volume of people. So even people flicking over their page, the noise just seemed very pronounced. Um, and normally it wouldn't bother me, but you know, when you're late and you're kind of rushing and you're stressed and you sit down and then you hear this flickety flick flick and the guy was belting along at maths at 100 miles an hour and I was going, how is anybody learning in here? There's just too many people in the same room. Yeah, so I mean, my sister who's dyslexic went back to college during COVID, and she went to UCD and she enjoyed it because for the vast majority of the time she was
Mm,
on Zoom
exactly.
and all the lessons were recorded. And so then she had the opportunity, if she missed something, she could rewatch them. And she actually did super well. And she's now a nurse. But she found that if she went into it changed, you're right, completely after COVID. They went back. You weren't allowed to record the content, even though it'd been recorded for 2 years. And so if you didn't keep up, you were like way behind. So it's bizarre that they could do it for 2 years and then they kind of undid all the things that worked for so many people. Um,
Exactly. And it's just an unusual concept of this, I suppose, accommodations in a university context being very different, and often you think a little bit more open-minded to,
yes.
primary and secondary, of laptops and different pieces of software. But as you mentioned there, the recording now of classes digitally is very hard to come by in some universities.
Yeah.
Recently, I came across a lecture that, I would have access to recording it even through a dictaphone and just the content, and that's become a huge issue now that they don't want to allow that. And yes, there's all, GDPR, and there's not a sharing of it, so it's still only for my personal use and all of those bits and pieces. But there's an
Yeah.
awful lot, I feel, of more challenges for a learner that needs to absorb information that, for me, I don't absorb anything in a classroom environment. I just have to go in and sit down, and I can walk out and I have no idea what was even being mentioned. So it is a very, very inefficient use of my time and learning.
Exactly.
But I'm there to attend so that somebody can tick me off a roll as if I'm 4 or 5. But I still then have to go home and I have my lists of, I need to read this and I need to look at
So
that.
then it's taking up twice as long for you to
Exactly.
do it.
Yes.
And clearly you're not alone there. And then there's the other people who, like you said, don't like big rooms, don't like rooms at once. Like there's just so many different things that people like or dislike, and it's very inefficient. There's actually a girl that I follow. She's young, she's only about 24. She lives in Copenhagen and she went to college. She does a lot of traveling around the world, but she went to college for a few months, didn't really enjoy it. So she's now doing her whole college course online. So she can access all the lectures and she just sits in a library and puts her earphones in. And she said it's just so much more efficient because she can get up, she can go for a run because she knows she needs to run. She can come back and like she's flying through this course. So it doesn't actually make sense because I'm not even sure, is that a thing that's available in the Irish universities? Can you do a thing like that? No.
So in some scopes, in some courses, they have some aspect of remote learning for some modules, and I'd imagine the stats in those modules for most students, not only students with neurodiversity difficulties, is
Yeah.
probably way higher a percentage and engagement and an exam-based score than attending a weekly class for people that need to, commute and park a car and go in and do all of the
Yeah, you're
dynamic.
right. And it's just a better use of your time. And I think that like anybody who's, I suppose, between 20 and 40, they're much more conscious of like a balanced lifestyle and a balanced use of their time. And like, I don't want to spend, they don't want to spend an hour and a half commuting one way now because my daughter goes, oh, well, that's 3 hours of your day gone. Like, you could nearly do a day's work in that 3 hours, but you could definitely study a college course during that time. And I have seen people on trains doing stuff like that. So yeah, it is a bit bizarre because I remember my sister telling me the dropout rate in nursing in the first year is 40 or 50%. But I think if, like you said, more of it was a bit more learning focused, more focused on the learner, what the learner needs. Because I'm not really a fan of the word accommodations. I think that it shouldn't have to be an accommodation. There should just be a variety of ways to access the information. And I know that that's what you think as well.
Yeah, and the accommodation word I always find really funny because I often like just still associate it with like, classic housing accommodation. So most of the time in my head, I'm like, what do you mean
So
by
you're
accommodation?
like you see, there you go.
Yeah, it's
That's
a
just like
multi
it's distracting you already by the word.
yeah, it's a
But I kind
multi-layered word, and it's a word that, was challenging for people that are new into the space and maybe just needing a recent assessment, or they're very new to neurodiversity, and there's so many acronyms and there's so much
Oh, if
lots
I
of
see
information.
one more
Yeah,
abbreviation, I thought it was just me. I'm going like you see all these people online. My child has blah 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 blah. What are all these initials? And then I look them up, and they're okay. That one's autism. That one's dyslexia. But they're like, why can't we just use the proper words? Like, why do we need an abbreviation of absolutely everything now? I'm not
yeah,
sure
there's
who
an
it's
awful
working.
lot of information overload, I think, for anybody, engaging in the process for the first time. And I suppose for parents and even for teachers that are maybe new enough to the neurodiversity space, it's really just about the little can go a long way as we kind of
Sure.
taper back to, what are the real essentials, what are the real priorities at the moment. There's no need to get every app and every piece of software and every handwriting device and
Oh, I know.
and reading device. It really is just about bringing it back to, okay, well, if we work on these two or three core areas and we got, this lens and we got this bit and we just trialed them. And as I was saying earlier, then we do a trial and then we do a review. So after a few weeks or whatever space of time you feel is comfortable, then to be like, okay, well, is this working? And then if it's not, let's try something new after that stage instead of let's do everything all at the
Everything at the
go,
same time.
and then everybody is overwhelmed, and there's a huge investment of time and energy and cost as well in that
And
process.
I think as well, you have to be careful if you're working with the child. The more things you add in, the more strange they feel. Do you know? They feel that there must be something really bad wrong with me. I have to go all these different. I had one child who came to me. His mom was a school principal. It's about 10 years ago. And when she arrived, she was saying to me, he was currently doing 9 different programs. And so I said I wouldn't be comfortable to work with him while he's doing all of these other things because it's just too much. Like you said, it's like so he was going for physiotherapy, speech therapy. He spoke fine, by the way. Um, um, occupational therapy. So it had 9 different specialists, and I said to her, like, what was his original diagnosis? Dyslexia. And I was going, like, why did you feel that you needed to do all of these 9 different things at the same time? I was going, that like every day after school, he was going to some different specialist sometimes too. And I was going, he's totally overwhelmed. One of them on its own might have worked. You have no way of knowing if any of, anyway, she came back about 6 months later and she dropped them all and we worked with them. And he did very well. But like, and I think sometimes parents, just like you said, they panic sometimes and they go, well, I better get this, I better get, or they'll talk to their friend and their friend say, you need the pen. And then someone else say, oh no, that's not that good, get the overlays. Or someone else say, no, that's, and like, you have to be, I saw someone talking about something else, I suppose you have to be critical in the information that you take in. Do you know what I mean? You have to think about, well, is this really what's going to serve my child best? Or, and same with people, younger people in colleges and stuff, because if something's on TikTok or Instagram, then that must really work. And then but people are just doing like too much sometimes. Sometimes the best thing is a break, I think. Learn relaxation skills and all that sort of good stuff. And so when you go into the schools and you said you do some training with the teachers, are you very conscious of like paring it back and only giving the essentials and not overloading them with like enormous amount of tools and information?
And again, I suppose that really depends on the school system and the
Yeah,
level of interest that they have and expertise in neurodiversity.
sure.
Every cohort of teachers is coming at it from a different lens. Either they've
That's
done
true.
additional outside of school learning, or they've been involved with it, or they have, a family member, or they have a child themselves at home with a learning difference. So they may be coming at it from a vast extent knowledge, or they may literally be hearing the words in the staff room and not have any idea really of the implications. And I suppose that's really where, an awful lot of things really do stem from, that the teacher training side of the system is still very much underutilized. And unfortunately, a teacher can
Yeah.
still become qualified in, teaching levels with very limited, if any, formal training or understanding into neurodiversity.
I mean, it's shocking, really, isn't it? That in 2025 that it's not part of the teacher training curriculum. Um,
It is a challenge, yes, it very much so. I suppose they're the people, in the forefront of students, and with all of the demands on teachers as it stands, it's almost like, how can we fit anything else in? But I suppose spinning that lens into, well, there's no real facility to not fit this in either.
exactly.
It's a 1 in 3 now students in the next kind of 5 to 10 years from a statistic basis will have some element of neurodivergent aspect, whatever label or box or not label
Yeah,
or
I know.
we want
I
them
honestly
to.
not a big fan of labels and boxes because nobody fits neatly into them. I mean, I went through school perfectly happy, and it was only when I was always an average student. If I wanted to do better, I could. But I was always very conscious that if I didn't have, I really hate rooms without windows. And when I went into first year in secondary school, the classrooms, it was in the center of the school, there was no window. I didn't do well at all in that environment. And only as an adult did I realize, well, it's because there was nothing for me to look at when I got bored. So I was stuck looking at grey painted walls and it's just not stimulating. Um, but yeah, I think that what they really need to do is, train the teachers in a different way. It's not about like what they're currently doing, like you said, is they're just adding more on top of the teachers. So here's your curriculum, and then I want you to accommodate this child and this child and all different aspects. Where what they really need to do is redo the education system. So from junior infants, we're going to teach the kids in a way that works because there is like multi-sensory learning that works for all kids, whereas we're just not using that. They do it in some other countries. We still have more of the model of sitting at the table for the vast majority of the day, which all kids get bored and not just the neurodiverse kids. 15 minutes and that's enough. I mean, some kids I work with, they only work for 15 minutes and then we go out in the garden and come back in. But their brains work much better then, or we play card games, or one little boy, he's autistic. I have to play chess with him every week. I'm shocking at chess, and so he always beats me. He's about 7. Now, some of the rules he plays by are his rules, but like, you know, I'm not going to argue it. He's only young, but he knows that I'm not going to push him to do other things. I'll say, okay, so we'll do the chess and then we'll do something else. And oh yeah, okay. But if I just said we're not playing chess, well, he'd be, well, I'm not doing anything then. So you do, I think, have to develop a bit of flexibility, wouldn't you say so,
Exactly. I think it's that evolvement of the classic learning style. We're
Yeah,
very into the well-being and alternative ways of learning, if that's movement-based, puzzles, games, an aspect of creativity, art, then organization, clocks, time, a
yeah,
really kind of well-rounded approach to just sit down there and read a book and do your homework, and let's go over the phonics and let's do the toe by toe. All of those programs and strategies can be very useful. But I
yeah,
suppose during the school day, that's really what a student is being faced with for the 5 or 6 hours that they're in and in that learning environment. So to come out and trial things that are different, which creates further neuron pathways between the right and the left side of the brain that helps them learn, absorb, and do problem solving. And doing those tasks can really not only help them academia wise, but can also really instill a sense of confidence and a sense of resilience in the child, that they're like, okay, well, I did something new today this way.
Yeah.
I tried it and it worked out really well. And this is something that's completely different for me. And then it's helping on those other areas. So it's that pivot really at times, if we can move away from that it has to look like they're sitting at a desk and they have to
Yeah.
be reading the book and they have to have a pen and a pencil, and there usually has to be, drama and a whiteboard and all of that stuff. Well, that's not really the mechanism for learning for all students, but
No.
unfortunately, that's the message we're sought after and told from an education system.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you. I do a lot of work with cush balls where you stand on one leg and throw the cush balls back and forth. And like you said, that opens new neural pathways. And people don't realize by even I tell everyone your kids should definitely do a sport like playing hurling because it's such a fast game. It really helps with focus. Um, and they're the things that people need to do more of, but the impact that they have is also on their academics as well. And I know, Una, that you have to dash off and you've given up a lot of your time. We really appreciate it. And for anyone who was on our conference yesterday, Una did endeavour to join us, and she did join us for a while, but she was traveling at the time, so the logistics didn't work very well. So we're delighted that Una could join us today, and we will be sharing this podcast with everybody. And thanks for sharing all your knowledge, Una. And Una, do you want to give out the links of where so Una's based in Cork, but I know she travels around.
Yeah, so we do an awful lot of online support as well for
Yeah.
students throughout Ireland. We have a parent-based workshop and programs throughout the year, but also an awful lot of awareness training during October for Dyslexia Awareness Month, and then one-to-one support. So if anybody has any queries or ongoing questions, myself or any of my colleagues will be happy to touch base. And the best way to reach out really is either through some of our social media or through blossomforlife.com, and it's the number 4 in the middle of people
Yeah.
running for. So Blossom for Life or on our social media would be great. Thank you.
Oh, great. Thanks so much for joining us, Una. And if you would like to get in touch with me, I'm also on all social media platforms as either myself, Anne-Marie Beggs, or the Paragraph Challenge. And my email address is annemariebeggs@gmail.com, and the website is theparagraphchallenge.com. So thanks again for listening, everybody. And I know we all thoroughly enjoyed Una's chat and information on her business and her life experience to date. Thanks for joining us, and I'll see you again soon.
Thank you.
So, thanks, Una.
No problem. It's still recording, Anne-Marie. Did you?
Okay.